So there you have it, one of the most heavily anticipated games in the first weekend of the Rugby World Cup is done. South Africa against Scotland. Not the best spectacle in the end, probably not too surprising for reasons that I'll get into in the video. And in fact, if I lift the camera up, you'll be able to see that the fans are starting to leave the Stade Velodrome behind me. So I've tried to find a relatively quiet spot just to debrief kind of on the game. So make sure you give me your thoughts in the comments section down below. As I say, not the best spectacle, but I think there are probably quite understandable reasons for that. So drop a comment down below, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. But let's get into it. Okay, so South Africa 18, Scotland 3, the final scoreline. As I say, not really a pretty game. It was probably the game this weekend I was most excited about, and maybe why I was unwise to feel that way ahead of it. I mean, I suppose on paper it is a great game, but I think this was always going to be tight. And I wrote down on my notes here, in fact, basically the first thing I made a note of minutes into the game was this will be a scrap. And the reason I felt that is just because of the way the early stages panned out. It was a little bit scrappy. There was a lot of kicking, and actually it felt quite nervy. And that's the reason that I think maybe we should have been more sensible in our expectations for this game, because Pool B is just so tough, because it's going to be so hard for these teams to get out of. This was as close to a quarter-final as you can really get in the pool stage, I think, because for the winner of this game it was so important, and for the loser it's so important as well. So actually I think we kind of saw a quarter-final, and I think we saw the nerves of what felt like knockout rugby, even though it wasn't knockout rugby, if that makes sense. And South Africa were the team that were able to control that. I think they have a game plan that, first of all, is better set up for that kind of tournament-style rugby. But they stifled Scotland. And I think when Scotland look back on this game, they'll be pretty disappointed, because I don't think they particularly landed a shot. And that's partly because South Africa were able to shut them down, because South Africa were able to make it so that Scotland didn't really have much of the ball. They didn't really have any of the territory, and they were constantly having to try and get out of their own half. So it was a pretty smart game for the Springboks. I don't think their fans will necessarily be up in arms at this. I don't think it's necessarily a statement win against one of the best teams in the world, but it is a win, and that's the most important thing. And they get their campaign up and running with a victory, and it puts them in a good spot now to qualify from the group, regardless of what happens for them against Ireland. So from that point of view, I think the Springboks will be pretty happy, and in particular, their game plan, their style of rugby, the way they were able to execute that, I think, as I say, I think they'll be pretty delighted with. And you talk about Scotland not throwing a punch and the importance of the game, and from a Scotland point of view, I feel like it's the sort of match that if you do get an opportunity, you have to take it. And that's where the Darcy Graham 3-on-1 that he butchered in the first half was so costly in the end. I don't think it necessarily is the difference between obviously the ultimate scoreline, because in the end South Africa win by more than just one score. But I think when you have so little of the ball and so little of the territory, when you get those moments, and it was a great first phase attack off a line out that they threw into the midfield, they shipped it to the left hand side. Darcy Graham not being able to free his hands up and get that pass away, I think is something that Scotland will look back on and think, in these matches, in these moments, you have to take those opportunities. It's absolutely pivotal. And there were some positives for Scotland. I know ultimately they'll look at the result and they'll be pretty disappointed, but I thought their set piece in the first half was good. I know their scrum came under quite a lot of pressure in the second half. Their line out I thought was very good, and actually I mentioned them throwing all the way into the midfield. I think they had a specific tactic to throw towards the back of the line out, which worked well for them in the first half, but ultimately it just wasn't enough. And they never really looked like seriously troubling the Springboks, whose defence, once again, was awesome. It always is with South Africa. We kind of know it as a staple of their game. But it stifled Scotland. Their line speed got up in their face. Even when Scotland had some good carries and were able to get themselves some forward momentum and some quick ball, South Africa were quite quickly able to rearrange in defence, and then it ended up just being one-out runners. They'd turn the ball over, they'd get mistakes. There was very little opportunity, really, for Scotland to score a try. If you think back on that game, the Darcy Graham moment is probably the best one that I can think of anyway. So there you go. That's just one of them. A few other talking points to come out of this. Marnie Libok again, we're going to be talking about his kicking. What did he leave out there? 8 points. Was it 2 penalties, 1 conversion he missed? It then was Faf de Klerk that took the conversions for the last 2. One really great one from the touchline. I actually watched Faf de Klerk in the warm-up, and he was having kicks at goal from kind of 50 metres out. So maybe he is going to be the guy going forward. But when they get to those even tighter games against maybe even better opposition, possibly Ireland in the group, does South Africa need someone else stepping up at the tee? I think that might be something that a lot of Springbok fans are saying after this. But I think, again, kind of a fact that really highlights the way in which South Africa controlled this game. There weren't any points scored in the final 30 minutes of the game. It was the two quick-fire tries after half-time. 49 minutes, Arendse goes over. Faf converts that as a save from the touchline. And then the full-time score ends up being 18-3. Scotland weren't able really to throw a shot. Those are my kind of quick thoughts at the end of the game. I'm going to head out and try and speak to a few of the fans now. But what did you make of it? Do you agree with me that it was ultimately a cagey, not the best looking, but kind of such high stakes on the game that's maybe the reason that it wasn't quite as exciting as many of us were expecting? You can let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in the next one.